Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Well, hello and welcome to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and today we've got a very special guest. His name is Scott Stolarick, and he's a licensed psychotherapist who's been practicing in the state of Illinois for over 30 years. And Scott brings a non-threatening approach to the clinical context, placing a high value on the importance of establishing rapport and safety for those he serves. He's a believer in the collaborative approach to healing, empowering clients to play an active role in their movement towards health. And that is beautiful. Scott, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Great, Joe. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. This is a broad scoped podcast about healthy living, but really mind, body, and spirit is important. We talk a lot about the body, and sometimes we talk about the mind and the spirit. So this is great to go into I don't know, I think that maybe some of the most important part of health.
Yeah, there's such a connection. Doing a lot of work with trauma over the years, it's very clear that when individuals come in to focus on trauma treatment, there's often accompanying somatic symptoms that they report that, are, in my opinion, very much connected to their emotional experience.
Oh, absolutely. There's the concept of psychosomatic, right? And
Right.
the truth is, your mind can create any symptom from, an itch to a dead limb. I mean, anything. Your mind can do it all.
You're very powerful. Yeah, very powerful. And when folks feel, tangled or stuck or misguided in that emotional domain, they often feel it physically, and they often run into situations medically where they really don't have answers.
Exactly. Especially today, you get diagnosed in 30 seconds, and if you don't hit the box, sometimes they just don't know what's wrong with you, and they throw medicine at it and it doesn't work, and you can get stuck in a bad loop. You know, um, Scott, I'm curious. You've been working in this field for over 30 years. What brought you to this?
Wow. Well, I've always been a real curious person. I've even growing up, I would, often wonder, why people choose things, why they do what they do for a living, why they respond in certain ways, why they act certain ways. So the difference and the complexity of people was always something I was drawn to. And as I entered college and got an opportunity to learn more about that through the psychology and the sociology program I was in, it just seemed to take hold,
Nice.
and become a firmer, more motivated interest as those years went on.
That's cool. So just finding your way along your path, and you just kind of fell into this is working for me. I like it. Want to keep pursuing it.
For sure, for
Nice,
sure.
nice. So tell me about your practice. Do you work exclusively with trauma survivors, or um, is it a broad scope of patients you deal with?
Well, right now, whether it's by design, I don't know exactly what, but the caseload composition over time does fluctuate. And at present, I am doing a lot of trauma work individually. I do a lot of couples work as well.
Okay.
Um, some family work at present, not doing any groups or anything like that. But addiction is part of what I work with as well. and some grief work. But I would say trauma and recovery are part of my wheelhouse at this point.
And according to the information I have, you talk about a non-threatening approach. When people are trying to resolve a problem, sometimes, it's by their own choices. Sometimes it's, mandated, through one thing or another. And there's all different approaches. Why don't you tell me a little bit about, how you go after this?
Well, I think first and foremost, everyone is their own unique package, so to speak.
Hmm.
Everyone comes to the table with things that you've seen before that are similar to what you've dealt with before, but they're not exactly the same as the next person. Um, and it's really important to demonstrate a keen interest in who they are individually and their respective journey to the destination that they're at present. And that's what I really try to focus in on to make sure I understand that the best way possible so that I can be, um, a good receptor site for the information that they provide, as well as a guide, if you will, in the path that we collaboratively develop towards their healing. So the non-threatening piece is simply being interested, being open at all times for clarification, and um, really seeking consent and buy-in to provide any thoughts or hypotheses that I may have, and empowering the person that I'm working with to either use or not use those suggestions depending on, what they are.
So, in my experience, I've not dealt directly with a psychologist, but I know a number of practitioners, and I know plenty of people who have, gone to therapy like that. And my my vision of this is you sit down and on a couch or in a chair and you start talking, asking questions, and your side of it is more and how do you feel about this? Getting the people to talk about really getting them to do all the work of talking about it, and you're just I don't want to use that word to diminish it, but your role is more to kind of crack the door open a little bit to let them help find their own way through it. Is that kind of accurate?
It is. I think when I first meet a client, I set the frame of letting them know, that they're the teacher in this early going, and I'm the student, and it's it's my motivation and my goal to learn about them as much as I can, which is why I'm big on doing a thorough social history, doing a thorough genogram of not only their current family, but their family of origin to really start to identify relationships, significant experiences, traumas, education levels, substance use, um, to really get that picture because every picture is different. And more often than not, individuals are happy to tell you that because they want to be heard, they want to be understood. And once I have that, my ability to provide not only empathy and reflective listening, but guidance as well is improved greatly.
So when you refer to the term genogram, that's the first I've heard of that, but you're talking about really just kind of sharing the nature of the relationships in the family and just going like you were saying, describing kind of the an outline of who these people are and what their influence or how they
Yeah, yeah.
affect them. Interesting.
Yeah, a family tree,
Uh-huh.
things you see on like ancestry.com. And, those are really, really interesting tools. I call them cheat sheets
Uh-huh.
because, I'll have those notes in front of me each session, and it's a really good reference point that I have at my fingertips to try to tie things together in a specific moment, or to frame a question in the right way, to use the correct names of people that have been, shared with me.
Hmm.
So I really enjoy doing genograms and find them to be so helpful as a very visual person. I find that to be a great tool in my process.
I like that. I'm learning a lot about, trauma and trauma survivors. I was fortunate. I mean, I grew up in kind of a traditional family, in the 70s. So I got my ass whooped a few times, but it
Mhm.
didn't hurt me in the sense of I don't feel like I've got any major lasting trauma because of it. Somehow I dealt with it, but I know a lot of people don't. And recently, we're talking about trauma survivors from some inmates in Soledad prison, and one in particular was talking about um, trauma from young children
Mhm.
received by people that are supposed to be their anchor and their guide and the people that they trust. And I see in your bio that you deal with kids as young as 12. Tell me a little bit about. I'm trying to sort of piece all these things together. And what's your experience as far as like I see accountability as a big important element of
Yes.
our mental health. So I believe that, I own my own life and whatever happened, I trace it back down to some choice I made, and I don't generally attribute a problem to an outside source. However, there are definitely outside influences that you can't do anything about, especially when
Sure.
you're a child. What's your experience with younger clients with regards to that?
Yeah, they're really great to work with because I think the level of candor and the level of honesty tends to be greater when younger because we're less filtered and less impeded by what we learn when we become adults. I find it refreshing. I think that I learn a lot from the people that I serve, and I learn a lot from young people. I learn a lot about their resiliency. And I think that depending on the context that they are in, they're more than happy to talk about their journey and how they see the world. Sometimes that's not the case, but typically, if a young person ends up in therapy, there's um, a promotion of the idea that openness is good and
Hmm?
candor is good. And if that's not the case, then my job focuses on engagement and creating an atmosphere of comfort for them and trust so that they could get to that place where they can share what their parents think they need to work on or their teachers think they need to work on. So it's it's always refreshing and a gratifying opportunity to work with youngsters.
Hi, this is Joe Grumbine, and I wanted to share an update. The platform that hosts this podcast has made some changes to the subscriber settings, and we have a number of subscriber only episodes that we offer to the supporters. And for a minimum of $3 a month, we can get you signed up. And If you're already signed up and you're having some kind of trouble locating these episodes in the other platforms, I would say maybe the best answer is to unsubscribe and then resubscribe. I'm sorry for the hassle. I don't have any way to make a change, but I'm very grateful for all the support. Thank you.
I've always heard, or I've heard, I guess, that one of the humans' most, I don't know, the great desires is to be heard.
For
And we
sure.
live in a world where everybody's busy doing their own thing and
For sure.
everybody's, busy yapping. And sometimes it's hard to find somebody who will listen. Do you find that you approaching your clients as a listener, do you find that most of them really appreciate that and just kind of like, I know it's sometimes when you meet somebody new and they get chatty, like they just needed somebody to listen to them and you just could
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
pretty much and they'll tell you their whole life story because you took the time to listen or at least appear to listen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. I think having a person who's willing to sit and to stay focused and to follow the journey that they want to take you on has such value. I've had many past sessions where I've maybe said a handful of words throughout the whole meeting. And at the end of the meeting, the client will thank me profusely for doing such a good job. And where I, simply sat with them and was a partner in their journey. And I think that speaks to the importance of being available and being a resource, and that is so needed today. In so many ways, there are so many people who feel disregarded, invalidated, um, discredited, you name it. And I think having a voice is something that they crave greatly.
Hmm. Now, when you're coming along and having these conversations, and ultimately maybe a client or patient will, reveal what they see as their problem, and maybe they feel stuck, or maybe they don't know what to do. I know there's lots of different tools. We've had a number of different therapists of various sorts on the show and talk about different types of tools from exercise to meditation to mindfulness to, there's just so many different ways to approach a problem like that. Are there tools that you particularly find useful?
Yeah, I mean, all of the things that you just mentioned are very valuable, very valuable techniques or tools to use. Um, one of the things that I find very important is just patience and emphasizing that um, we are uh, functioning on their timeline, their level of comfort, and that there really isn't an urgency to get to something that you're not comfortable getting to. Now, in some cases, maybe that's not the context, but for example, if a teenager comes in and their parents definitely have an agenda for them to start talking about a certain issue that's on the table, um, I'll make it clear that we'll talk about that when they feel ready to.
Mhm.
And when they feel ready to, it's very likely that because of that readiness, we'll have meaningful discussion and productive outcome versus them looking at me as merely an extension of the lectures that their parents are giving them. And I tell the parents this as well. Um, that, they'll march a kid into the session and say, okay, he needs to talk about this and this and this and this. And you got an hour to fix him. And so, so it's always about
Sure, that always works out well.
right, right. It's about expectation management.
Mhm.
I find out what people are interested in. And I have a variety of interests myself. And if I can connect with somebody on an interest, a shared interest, that's a great way to develop engagement and rapport. And if someone is into something that I know nothing about, I'm more than happy to be educated about what it is and have them teach me. So giving them the floor and letting them guide the process is something that I think is also very, very helpful.
Mhm. I I see that this is a term I'm not familiar with as well. I'm always trying to learn more, and I figure if I learn more, the listeners will too.
Yeah.
A reference to EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing.
Yes.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. EMDR is a treatment modality that is utilized specifically to treat trauma and phobias, and its basis is in bilateral brain stimulation.
Hmm.
It's a newer modality of treatment, but a very highly researched one, developed in 1987 by Dr. Francine Shapiro. And the premise in her early work was that a troublesome thought, a trauma, something you can't seem to integrate or resolve, tends to be unraveled and reprocessed more easily when the eyes are moving back and forth, thus
Okay.
stimulating each side of the brain to facilitate um, more communication between the two sides of the brain. Now, the technique has evolved over time. Early in my career, you would hold your fingers up and move those back and forth and ask the client to track your arm movements with their eyes. After getting very, very sore arms and elbows, I was glad to discover that light bars were created, and that's simply a mechanism that you set down at eye level on a tripod, and it has dots that move back and forth in different colors and at varying speeds to help the person very systematically move their eyes back and forth, as well as using tactile hand vibrators or audio sounds bouncing from one ear to the other. And the idea is first and foremost informed consent. I really spend a lot of time with clients who come to me and have an interest in EMDR because they heard from a friend of a friend of a friend that it's really cool, it's really interesting, and that's great. And I'm glad for that. But it isn't the traditional psychotherapeutic paradigm. It's different. The clinician does not do a lot of talking, but does basically more managing and, if you will, staying out of the way. So I spend a good amount of time giving reading material and videos and discussion, making sure clients know what it is. And then after they sign on the line to say, yeah, I understand this, let's do it, I'm ready for it, we begin the process by picking what they refer to as a target, an
Okay.
issue that is a specific issue or a specific theme that is problematic, more than likely a trauma. And as that is processed through the eye movements, through the hand sensors, through the sounds in the ears, whichever they choose, what happens sort of organically through the process is it becomes less threatening. They see it in a way that they can conceptualize as more adaptive, and they are able to attach eventually a more healthy response to the trauma versus being triggered or experiencing regression when they think about it. It doesn't eliminate the memory. The memory is always there. It doesn't eliminate triggers. Triggers will happen. But what it does is it takes the immense charge, the immense reaction, if you will, out of the experience when it's brought up or when it's thought about, so that it's more integrated into your history of experiences, and doesn't stick out like a sore thumb when you think about it, dream about it, or when someone brings it up. And it's very interesting. It goes to the issues very quickly.
Okay.
Talk therapy is awesome, and sometimes it's more conducive to the pace that someone's ready for. But a client who does EMDR could find themselves in the midst of this issue and the nitty gritty of it, like almost instantly. So I want them to be prepared for that, and sometimes the speed of this process, because it can do that. And when I think they're ready for that, they're more equipped to know that, okay, I'm not doing anything wrong. This is part of what's supposed to happen, or I shouldn't say supposed to, but part of what can happen.
Hmm.
And they're less caught off guard by it. So it's very interesting. And as I said, the therapist in the setup that I use has a little remote control, and I press a button to stop eye sets and to restart them. And at the end of each set, I'll simply ask, what comes up for you now? And they'll give me sort of a condensed synopsis of what came up in there. And my goal and my objective is then to take what they tell me and say, okay, let's focus on this right now. And then we do another round, and that keeps going. And it could go for several sessions. And, the idea isn't to necessarily eliminate the stressors attached to a trauma, but maybe reduce them.
Okay.
And in some cases, it may not be healthy to eliminate someone's stress responses to a trauma, because you may want them to have some healthy vigilance about a certain issue.
Sure.
You don't want to take that and if you will, disarm them completely, but also maybe take what they refer to as a 10 level stressor down to maybe a 3.
Mm-hmm.
And you work with that client to say, does this feel like realistic and adaptive? Because you'll learn that in the processing that it really doesn't feel to them like they can get it below that 3, that it feels like that's the natural stopping point. And that's okay. That's
Sure.
okay. Because some things, for example, if a person is walking down a dark street in the evening and they get mugged and their wallet is stolen, if they come to me for EMDR on that, I don't want to desensitize them to dangerous places at night, and so I would want them to have that vigilance about them, to be aware of their surroundings, to know where they're going, when they're going there, but to also have the trauma of experiencing a mugging as something that's more in their past and not impeding the path that they're taking moving forward.
I like that. You've been practicing for over 30 years. I'm sure you have books you could write about, the experiences you've had, but is there one patient that stands out to you right now as somebody that you've just really dramatically helped?
Well, I don't know that one jumps off the map in particular. I used to do in my career started in corrections.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I worked as a counselor in our local jail
Okay.
over 30 years ago. And then that transitioned into doing forensic work for the courts, specifically evaluating and treating sex offenders. And in general, I will say that helping someone who nobody else is really in a hurry to help
Hmm.
um, is a nice opportunity to help the larger picture.
Okay.
And that has always felt good to me. I don't do that work anymore. I did it for 26 years and
Wow.
got my fill. Um, but but largely statistically, at least in this county, a lot of those individuals don't get sentenced to incarceration. They are in the community.
Right.
And to equip them with tools to cope and to find work and to deal with their own process and to become accountable for what they did and to honor the people that they hurt. If if I could achieve that in that work, that was a good feeling. Um, so in general, that sticks out as well as helping someone who's been hurt find their voice.
Nice.
That's always a wonderful thing to observe and to be a part of. And if that can happen, that's a good day.
I like it. I suspect that your profession is very rewarding in that sense. When you even make a little progress, anytime you help somebody, it's an amazing feeling. Well, Scott, we're running a little low on time. I'd like to see, do you have so much that you could share, but is there one thought that you would like to leave our listeners with as far as of all the things you've learned? Is there one thing that you'd like to share?
Sure, sure. Well, I decided to name my practice Mosaic Pathway Counseling. And the reason for that is that I think all of us, in a way, are like a mosaic. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think we're defined by one specific piece, whether that piece is positive or whether that piece is negative. And maybe for the people that you've spoken of who happen to be incarcerated, their challenge is, even though maybe they have the view that the system is looking at them and defining them by a wrongful act or a poor choice, that a good challenge is to view yourself as a collection of choices, positive, negative, and neutral, versus maybe exclusively as one negative choice. When you look at a mosaic, if you're standing an inch in front of it, you only see a few pieces. But it's
Right.
only when you back up 10 to 15 feet away, you see the whole thing and say, oh, wow, I know what this is now. So my thought would be for all people to do that with themselves
Nice.
and to have the realization that, we're all a combination of a bunch of little pieces that make a picture.
I like that. That's a profound bit of wisdom. I think that we're served well to consider that. Scott, how you're in Illinois, right?
I am, yes.
And how does somebody find you if somebody's interested in reaching out for you
Well,
as a practitioner?
yeah, the best way would be to check out my website, which is www.mosaicpathwaycounseling, all one word, .org. And my website is a good resource to learn a little bit about me, to learn about my approach to things, to learn about a little bit about my creative side, to learn about my practice, some articles I've written, um, and just kind of get a flavor of how I go about this work. That would be the best place to access.
Fantastic. Well, this has been an insightful conversation. And, I always like to leave the door open. There's always so much to talk about. And, in a half an hour, you only get so much to sometimes just throw an outline out there. But if you ever want to come back and dive deep into any of these things that we're talking about, I'd certainly like to welcome you.
Oh, always happy to do that, Joe. Thank you so much for having me today.
Beautiful. This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine. I want to thank all of our listeners that make the show possible, and we will see you next time.
This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. We produce this show so that people can share their stories, people that have overcome obstacles, people that are undergoing obstacles. We're building a community of health-minded individuals. If you're interested in supporting the show, please leave a review on the platform you're listening to it on. If you're interested in becoming a guest, please send an email to itsjoegrumbine@gmail.com, or you can send a note into the notes section of the podcast. All right. Well, thank you for supporting this show, and we hope you've enjoyed it.